The Grand Assembly Hall floated in the darkness of space like a giant crystal sphere. Inside, representatives from 200 different alien species sat in their designated seats. The air was filled with the sounds of breathing, clicking and humming from creatures of every shape and size imaginable. Some had scales, others had fur, and many had features that would seem impossible to human eyes. At the center of the massive chamber stood Counselor Vexthon. He was tall and thin, with pale blue skin that seemed to glow under the lights. His 4 eyes swept across the assembly as he prepared to speak. This was his moment, the culmination of 3 years of careful political maneuvering. Honored members of the Galactic Council, Vexthon began, his voice carrying through the translation devices everyone wore. Today we decide the fate of a species that has proven itself incompatible with civilized society. Today we vote on the human question. In the visitors section, Ambassador Hyeron sat perfectly still. She was a woman in her 50s with gray streaks in her black hair and eyes that had seen too much violence. Her hands gripped the armrests of her chair so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She knew what was coming. The backroom deals had already been made. The votes had been counted and recounted. But she had to try anyway. Vexthon continued his presentation, projecting images onto the massive screens that surrounded the chamber. The first image showed the Kepler station incident from 6 months ago. The footage was damning, even though Hyeron knew it had been carefully edited. 3 Vralthian diplomats, unarmed and on a peaceful mission, were brutally murdered by a human security officer named Deho. Vexthon said. No trial was held. No justice was served. The human government protected this killer and called his actions self-defense. The footage played in slow motion. Deho, a muscular man in his 30s with a scar across his jaw, moved through the station corridor. 3 Vralthian diplomats approached him. Words were exchanged, though the audio had been conveniently corrupted. Then Deho's weapon was in his hand and the diplomats fell. What the footage didn't show was what happened before. It didn't show the Vralthians trying to access restricted areas. It didn't show them threatening the civilian population. It didn't show them drawing weapons first. Hyeron had the unedited footage, but the council had refused to accept it as evidence. This is not an isolated incident, Vexthon continued. Humanity has been involved in 17 border conflicts in the past decade. They refuse to submit to standard pacification protocols. They reject genetic modifications that would reduce their aggressive tendencies. They are by definition a warrior species from a death world. More images appeared. Human soldiers in combat. Human ships in battle formations. Human colonies expanding into disputed territories. Each image was carefully chosen to make humanity look dangerous and expansionist. Hyeron waited for her turn to speak. According to council protocol, the accused species had the right to defend itself before the vote. It was a formality, a pretense of fairness, but she would use every second of it. Finally, Vexthon finished his presentation and gestured toward her. The human representative may now speak. Hyeron stood and walked to the center podium. She looked small compared to many of the alien representatives, but she carried herself with dignity. She had prepared a long speech, full of facts and figures and legal arguments, but as she looked around the chamber, she realized that logic would not save her species today. Members of the council, she began. You are about to make a terrible mistake. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. This was not the pleading tone they had expected. The incident at Kepler Station was self-defense, Hyeron continued. The Vralthian diplomats were not unarmed. They were not peaceful. We have evidence of this, evidence that has been rejected by this council for political reasons. Vexthon started to interrupt, but Hyeron spoke over him. Her voice grew stronger. Deho acted to protect 200 civilian lives. The Vralthians were attempting to seize our colony by force, using their diplomatic credentials as cover. Yes, he killed them. And yes, we protected him because what he did was right. She pulled up her own images now showing human achievements, medical breakthroughs that had saved billions of alien lives, engineering marvels that powered half the stations in council space, agricultural techniques that had ended famines on a dozen worlds. We have given everything to this council, Hyeron said. We have shared our knowledge freely. We have defended the weak when others turned away. And now you want to expel us because we refuse to let ourselves be victims? She pointed at Vexthon. The counselor speaks of our aggression, but he does not mention that every conflict we have been involved in was defensive. He does not mention that we have never started a war. He does not mention that the Vralthians have been trying to take our colonies for years. and we are simply refusing to surrender." For a moment, Yaren thought she might be getting through to them. Some of the representatives were nodding. The Marini counselor, Tal, a gentle creature covered in soft golden fur, looked troubled. But then Vexthon spoke again. "The human representative confirms what we already know. They refuse to accept peaceful solutions. They choose violence over diplomacy. They are too dangerous to remain in civilized space." The chamber erupted in discussion, dozens of species talking at once, their words blending into an incomprehensible noise. The council chairman, an ancient being that looked like a floating tree, called for order. "We will now vote," the chairman announced. "All in favor of designating humanity as a Category Red threat species and expelling them from the Galactic Council, indicate now." Lights began to appear across the chamber. Blue lights for yes, red lights for no. Hyaron watched as the blue lights multiplied. Vexthan's species voted yes. The Vralthians voted yes. Species after species that humanity had helped over the years voted yes. A few red lights appeared. The Marini voted no. A handful of smaller species voted no. But it was not nearly enough. The final count appeared on the screens, 184 in favor, 16 against. The chairman spoke in his deep, creaking voice. "By overwhelming majority, humanity is hereby expelled from the Galactic Council. All human colonies beyond the Sol system must be evacuated within 1 galactic standard year. Any humans remaining in Council space after this deadline will be removed by force." The chamber fell silent. Every eye turned toward Hyaron. She stood at the podium, completely still for a long moment. Then she smiled, and it was not a pleasant smile. "You have made your decision," she said quietly. "So let me make something very clear to all of you. For the past century, humanity has played by your rules. We have held back our strength. We have accepted insults and provocations. We have been patient and diplomatic. We did this because we believed in the dream of a peaceful galactic community." Her voice grew harder. "You mistake our restraint for weakness. You think that because we have been peaceful, we are not capable of violence. You think that because we have followed your laws, we need your laws to survive." She looked directly at Vexthon. "You have no idea what you have just unleashed. When humans came to the stars, we came as explorers and friends. Now you are sending us home as enemies. And trust me when I say this, you will regret it." Hyaron turned and walked out of the chamber. Behind her, the council erupted in outrage at her words. Vexthon was shouting about human arrogance. Other voices called for her arrest for making threats. But Hyaron did not look back. She had a message to send to Earth. The council had made its choice. Now humanity would make theirs. On Earth, in the underground command center beneath the unified government building, General Jiwan received the transmission. She listened to Hyaron's report in silence, her face showing no emotion. When it was finished, she turned to her staff. "Begin Operation Exodus," she ordered. "Bring our people home. All of them." She paused, then added quietly, "And activate Project Broken Arrow. If they want to see what humans are really capable of, we will show them." The age of human restraint was over. 6 months had passed since the Council's verdict, and the galaxy was watching the largest evacuation in known history. Across hundreds of worlds, humans were packing their lives into cargo containers and boarding ships bound for Earth. The mathematics were brutal and simple. Not everyone could be saved. On the agricultural world of New Pyongyang, Administrator Minho stood in the central plaza and looked at the crowd gathered before him. 10,000 people, all volunteers who had chosen to stay behind. They were farmers and engineers, teachers and doctors, young and old. They knew what their choice meant. "The last transport leaves in 3 hours," Minho said. His voice was steady, though his heart was breaking. "There is still room for some of you. Families with children will have priority. If anyone wants to change their mind, no one will judge you." Nobody moved. Minho had known they wouldn't. These were people who had spent their entire lives making things grow in alien soil. They were not the type to abandon their duty. A young woman named Yunji stepped forward. She was barely 20, with dirt under her fingernails and calluses on her hands. "Sir, we have made our choice. The last ships need to carry those who cannot defend themselves. We can. We will keep this colony running until Earth can come back for us." Minho nodded slowly. He was staying too. At 63 years old, he had helped build this world from nothing. He would not leave it now. "Then we have work to do," he said. "Automated systems need to be maintained. Crops need to be planted. And we need to make sure that when our people return, they find this place exactly as we left it. The volunteers dispersed to their tasks. Minho watched them go, then activated his communication console. He recorded a message to be sent with the last transport. To Earth Command, this is Administrator Minho of New Pyongyang. 10,000 colonists are remaining behind by choice. We will maintain the settlement and await your return. Tell Earth we did our duty. Tell them we kept the lights on. He sent the message and got back to work. There was no point in tears or grand speeches. There was only the work and the quiet dignity of people who understood sacrifice. Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out. On mining stations and research outposts, in orbital habitats and underground cities, humans were making impossible choices. The Council had given them 1 year, but the reality was worse. The distances were too great. The ships were too few. Every day the deadline drew closer, and the Council was not patient. At Horizon Station, a transport ship called the Morning Star was still evacuating civilians when the Vralthian enforcement fleet arrived. Captain Sunwoo of the Morning Star received the warning. Departure window exceeded, prepare to be boarded. We have 8,000 people still on the station, Sunwoo transmitted back. We need 6 more hours. Just 6 hours, the Vralthian commander's response was cold. Your deadline has passed. Evacuate the ship. You will be taken into custody. Sunwoo looked at his crew. They all knew what would happen if they surrendered. The civilians on the station would be left behind, probably killed or enslaved. He made his decision. Negative. We are not leaving these people. The Vralthian warships opened fire. The Morning Star was an unarmed transport. She had no shields, no weapons, no defenses. The first missile tore through her engine section. The second shredded her passenger compartments. The third and fourth were just cruelty. 8,000 people died in the space of 90 seconds. Captain Sunwoo and his entire crew. The civilians still waiting on the station. All of them gone. The Vralthians broadcast the attack across Council space as a warning. The deadline would be enforced absolutely. On Earth, General Jiwan watched the footage of the Horizon Station massacre. Her expression did not change, but everyone in the command center could feel the cold rage radiating from her. She had spent 30 years in the military. She had fought in the First Contact War. She knew what was coming. How many more stations are at risk? She asked quietly. Her aide checked the data. 17, ma'am. We cannot reach them in time, Jiwan nodded. She had known this was inevitable. The Council had never intended to let humanity leave peacefully. This expulsion was just the first stage. Extermination would follow. Continue the evacuation, she ordered. Save everyone we can. And accelerate Project Broken Arrow. I want those ships ready in 6 months, not 12. In a secret shipyard on the far side of Mars, construction crews were working around the clock. The ships they were building did not look like the sleek Council designs. They were blocky and brutal, covered in armor plating and weapons ports. They were ships designed for one purpose: war. Project Broken Arrow was humanity's insurance policy. General Jiwan had begun it 3 years ago, long before the expulsion vote. She had seen the writing on the wall. She had known that humanity's friendship would eventually be rejected, and she had prepared. The lead engineer on the project was a woman named Sumi. She was brilliant and tireless, working 18-hour shifts to meet the accelerated deadline. When Jiwan visited the shipyard, Sumi showed her the progress. The first battle group will be operational in 5 months, Sumi reported. 12 heavy cruisers, 40 destroyers, and 2 dreadnoughts. After that, we can produce 1 complete battle group every month. G1 studied the ships taking shape in the construction bays. They were beautiful in their own way, efficient and deadly. Will they be enough? G1 asked. Sumi smiled grimly. Ma'am, the Council has spent 1,000 years building ships for show and ceremony. We are building ships to kill. One of ours will be worth 10 of theirs. As the evacuation continued, something strange began to happen in Council space. The absence of humanity was creating problems nobody had anticipated. Trade routes that had relied on human merchants collapsed. Medical facilities discovered that their equipment was breaking down, and the human technicians who used to maintain them were gone. Food production dropped on worlds that had adopted human agricultural methods because nobody else understood how to make the systems work. On the Althari homeworld, a plague broke out. It was a new virus, something the Althari immune systems had never encountered. The cure required a specific antiviral compound that had been developed by human biochemists. The Althari had the formula, but they did not understand the synthesis process well enough to manufacture it themselves. Counselor Vexthon watched as his people began to die. Hundreds at first, then thousands. His own daughter, Lyra, caught the virus. She was only 16 years old, brilliant and kind. Vexthon sat by her bedside in the hospital, watching her struggle to breathe. "Father," she whispered, "why did you send the humans away? They could have helped us." Vexthon had no answer. He had been so focused on political power, on advancing his species' position in the council, that he had never considered the practical consequences. Humans had been integrated into galactic society so deeply that removing them was like pulling out a load-bearing wall. Lyra died 3 days later. Vexthon held her hand as she took her last breath, and something broke inside him. But it was too late for regrets. The humans were gone, and they were not answering any communications. Counselor Tal of the Merini tried to reach out. She sent message after message to Earth, offering apologies and begging for help. The Merini had voted against the expulsion. They had tried to stop this madness. Surely the humans would listen to friends. But Earth was silent. All transmissions into the Sol system went unanswered. It was as if humanity had simply vanished from the galaxy. In desperation, Tal organized a delegation. 5 ships carrying diplomats from species that had voted against the expulsion. They would go to Earth directly and plead for reconciliation. The delegation jumped to the Sol system and was never heard from again. Their ships simply disappeared. No distress signals, no debris, nothing. The silence from humanity became more frightening than any threat could have been. On a remote mining station called Tartarus 7, a man named Bowman was hiding in plain sight. He had missed the evacuation deadline because he had been deep in the asteroid mines when the order came. By the time he reached the surface, the last ship had left. Now he survived by pretending to be something he was not. He had altered his appearance, worn contact lenses to change his eye color, claimed to be from a distant human-like species. The station's new alien administrators were too busy fighting over the facility to notice one more worker. But Bowman was not just surviving. He was watching. He monitored the communications traffic. He tracked the Council's movements. And he sent encrypted reports back to Earth, using hidden relays and outdated transmission methods that the Council had forgotten existed. He watched as the galaxy began to tear itself apart. Without human peacekeepers, old conflicts reignited. The Vralthians began aggressively annexing border territories. Smaller species, no longer protected by human intervention, fell under the domination of larger powers. 3 months after the last human left Council space, Bowman intercepted a transmission that made his blood run cold. The Vralthians were assembling a war fleet. 200 ships, the largest military force seen in centuries. Their target, Earth. Bowman sent the warning home and waited. He did not know if Earth was ready. He did not know if humanity could survive what was coming. But he had faith in his people. They had survived ice ages and plagues, wars, and disasters. They would survive this too. On Earth, General Jiwan received Bowman's warning. She read it twice, then looked at the status board showing Project Broken Arrow's progress. The first battle group was 3 weeks from completion. The Vralthian fleet would arrive in 2 weeks. It would have to be enough. She turned to her staff and gave the order they had been waiting for. Battle stations. This is not a drill. Bring all defensive platforms online. Wake up the fleet. We are about to show these aliens what humans look like when we stop playing nice. 1 year had passed since humanity's expulsion, and the Galactic Council was beginning to understand the magnitude of its mistake. The realization came slowly, like poison spreading through a body. On the Council station orbiting Talaxis Prime, emergency sessions had become routine. Every day brought new reports of systems failing, economies collapsing, and conflicts erupting. The chamber that had once been filled with confident representatives now held frightened politicians looking for someone to blame. Counselor Vexthon was no longer celebrated as a hero. His daughter's death had become public knowledge, and with it came the revelation that human medicine could have saved her. The Althari plague had killed over 50,000 before it burned itself out. Vexthon's political rivals circled like predators, waiting for the right moment to strike. But the Althari were not alone in their suffering. Across council space, the absence of humanity was creating cascading failures. On the industrial world of Kavros Prime, the main fusion reactor failed. It was a massive installation, built with human engineering expertise 20 years ago. The Kavros had the blueprints and the maintenance manuals, but they lacked the deep understanding needed to fix a catastrophic breakdown. The reactor provided power for 3 billion people. Without it, entire cities went dark. The Kavros government sent desperate requests for help to other council species. None had the expertise. The humans who had designed the reactor were gone. The reactor stayed offline for 6 months before Kavros engineers finally got it running again, at 30% capacity. By then, industrial production had collapsed and unemployment had reached 40%. Similar stories played out on hundreds of worlds. Agricultural systems failed. Medical equipment broke down. Transportation networks ground to a halt. Every problem traced back to the same source: human knowledge and human skills that were no longer available. Councillor Tal of the Marini watched it all with growing horror. She had voted against the expulsion. She had warned the council that humanity was too integrated into galactic society to remove without consequences. Nobody had listened. Now she stood before the council again, trying to salvage what she could. "We must contact Earth," Tal said. Her gentle voice carried a note of desperation that was unlike her. "We must apologize and ask them to return. Pride means nothing when our civilizations are collapsing." Vexthon, reduced to a shadow of his former political power, actually agreed with her. "The Marini counselor is correct. We made a mistake. A terrible mistake. We should admit it and make amends," but others disagreed. The Vralthian representative, Commander Kresh, slammed his clawed hand on his podium. "We show no weakness. The humans are probably celebrating our problems. They probably caused some of these failures deliberately. We should not beg them for help. We should force them to help." Tal turned to face him, her fur bristling. "Force them? Have you forgotten what happened to your delegation ships? 3 vessels sent to make threats at the edge of their system. All destroyed without a trace." Kresh's eyes narrowed. "Those were scouts. I am talking about a real military force. 200 warships. We will go to Earth and remind the humans of their place in the galaxy." The chamber erupted in argument. Some species supported the Vralthians, seeing military action as a way to restore council authority. Others sided with the Marini, arguing for diplomacy and reconciliation. The debate went on for hours. Finally, the council chairman called for a vote. The question was simple: should the council authorize military action against Earth? The vote was closer than the expulsion had been, but fear and pride won out. The council authorized the Vralthian war fleet to restore order in the Sol system. Commander Kresh left the chamber with a savage smile on his face. Tal watched him go and felt a chill run through her. She had studied human history during her years as a diplomat. She knew what humans were capable of when cornered. This was not going to end the way Kresh thought it would. She tried one last time to send a message to Earth, a warning about the coming attack. Like all her previous attempts, it went unanswered. The Sol system remained dark and silent. On distant Tartarus 7, Bowman received word of the Council's vote through the station's communication intercepts. He immediately sent an encrypted warning to Earth, though he suspected they already knew. Human intelligence networks were better than the Council realized. Life on the mining station had become harder. The new administrators were incompetent and cruel. Without human oversight, safety standards had collapsed. 3 miners had died in the past month alone. Bowman kept his head down and his true identity hidden, but every day was a risk. One evening, a Vralthian overseer started questioning workers about their backgrounds. Bowman's forged papers were good, but they would not survive a detailed investigation. He made a plan to disappear deeper into the station's maintenance tunnels if necessary. But something unexpected happened. The overseer moved on to another worker, a young alien from a species Bowman did not recognize. The worker's papers were legitimate, but the overseer did not like his attitude. In front of everyone, the overseer struck the young worker across the face, knocking him to the ground. Bowman felt his hands curl into fists. This was not his fight. Getting involved would risk his cover. But he had been human for too long to watch injustice and do nothing. He stepped forward. "Leave him alone." The overseer turned toward Bowman, surprised that anyone would challenge him. "What did you say?" Bowman's training took over. Years of living among aliens had taught him how to seem harmless. "I said, sir, perhaps we could all get back to work. We have quotas to meet." The overseer studied him suspiciously, then laughed. "Yes, back to work. All of you." Bowman helped the young worker to his feet and they returned to their stations. It was a small thing, a moment of defiance that changed nothing. But it reminded Bowman of what he was. Human. And humans did not abandon each other. That night he sent another message to Earth. Not an intelligence report this time, just a personal note. "Still here. Still watching. Give them hell for us." On Earth, General Jiwan read Bowman's message and felt a rare smile cross her face. She had never met the man, but she understood him perfectly. He was alone in enemy territory, cut off from everything he knew and still fighting in his own way. "We will," she said quietly. "I promise you we will." The preparations for the Battle of Terra were complete. The defense platforms around Earth were online. The Mars shipyards had finished the first battle group ahead of schedule. The asteroid belt had been turned into a maze of weapons emplacements and kill zones, and humanity's newest weapons were ready. Technologies that the Council had forbidden, weapons systems that violated every treaty humanity had signed, nuclear warheads, kinetic impactors, gravitational weapons, biological agents, chemical weapons, things that civilized species did not use. But humanity had stopped being civilized 6 months ago, when the Vralthians massacred the Morning Star. G1 stood in the command center deep beneath the unified government building and watched the tracking data come in. The Vralthian fleet had departed from their staging area. Jump calculations suggested they would arrive at Earth in 72 hours. Ambassador Hiron joined her in the command center. She was no longer a diplomat. Those days were over. Now she was an advisor to the War Council. Her knowledge of alien psychology and council politics turned into a weapon. "They think this will be easy," Hiron said, watching the same data. "They think we are frightened and alone. They have convinced themselves that we were only strong because the council protected us." Jiwan nodded. "Let them think that. Let them come expecting an easy victory. The shock will be worse." Hiron hesitated, then asked the question that had been troubling her. "When this is over, when we have won, what comes next? Do we rejoin the council? Do we try to make peace?" G1's expression was cold and hard. "The council expelled us. They massacred our civilians. They tried to exterminate us. There will be no peace, Hiron. There will be victory. And when we are done, the galaxy will know that you do not attack humanity and survive." Hiron wanted to argue, to say that revenge was not the answer, but she remembered the footage of the Morning Star's destruction. She remembered the 8,000 people who had died for no reason other than council cruelty, and she said nothing. Across the Sol system, humanity prepared for war. Civilians were evacuated to underground shelters. Military personnel reported to their posts. Ships took up defensive positions. Everything was ready. On Mars, Captain Yeji stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, humanity's first dreadnought. The ship was enormous, 3 kilometers long and bristling with weapons. Every system had been tested and retested. The crew had trained for months in combat simulations. Yeji was young for a captain, only 32 years old. But she had graduated top of her class at the Naval Academy, and her scores in tactical warfare were the highest ever recorded. General Jiwan had personally selected her for this command. "Status report," Yeji ordered. Her tactical officer responded immediately. "All weapon systems online. Shields at maximum. Gravitational drives ready. We are prepared for combat, Captain." Yeji nodded. Through the view screen, she could see the rest of the fleet forming up. 12 heavy cruisers, 40 destroyers, and the Indomitable herself, the pride of humanity's new war machine. "How long until the Vralthians arrive?" she asked. 68 hours, Captain." Yeji allowed herself a thin smile. "Good. That gives us time to review the battle plan one more time. I want every officer on this ship to know exactly what we are doing and why." She pulled up the tactical display. The plan was brutal and simple. The Vralthians would expect a defensive battle, with humanity huddled around Earth trying to protect their homeworld. Instead, they would get an aggressive, coordinated assault, designed to destroy their fleet as quickly as possible. No mercy, no quarter, no prisoners. Yeji had studied the Council's military history. Their warfare was ritualized and restrained, with rules about acceptable targets and proper conduct. They had not fought a real war in centuries. Humanity remembered how. Humanity had never forgotten. The countdown continued. 60 hours, 50, 40. With each passing hour, the tension grew. But it was not fear. It was anticipation. Humanity had been forced to run, forced to hide, forced to abandon their colonies and their dead. Now they would fight back, and the galaxy would learn why you should never back a predator into a corner. The Vralthian war fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, like a swarm of metal locusts. 200 warships, each one a masterpiece of Council engineering, their hulls gleaming in the distant light of Earth's sun. This was the largest military force assembled in 3 centuries. It was meant to be overwhelming. Fleet Admiral Sunho stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Conqueror, and surveyed his forces with satisfaction. He was a career military officer, descended from a long line of warriors. His scales were dark green and covered with ceremonial scars from ritual combat. He had earned every one of them. "Begin scanning the system," Sunho ordered. "Locate all human military assets and defensive positions." The sensor officer worked his console, then paused. His expression changed from confidence to confusion. "Admiral, you need to see this." The main view screen changed to show the sensor data. Sunho stared at it for a long moment, trying to understand what he was seeing. Mars was surrounded by shipyards, massive construction facilities that had not existed a year ago. The asteroid belt was covered with weapons platforms. There were energy signatures everywhere, thousands of them, indicating active military installations, and the ships. Earth had ships. Not the handful of outdated vessels that intelligence had predicted, but dozens of modern warships arranged in defensive formations. "This is impossible," Sunho said quietly. "They could not have built all of this in 1 year." His tactical officer had the answer. "Sir, according to these signatures, they have been building this for at least 3 years. They started long before the expulsion vote." Sunho felt a chill run down his spine. The humans had known. They had known they would be expelled, and they had prepared for war while pretending to be peaceful. It was brilliant and terrifying, but he had 200 ships. Whatever the humans had built, it could not be enough to stop him. "Broadcast on all frequencies," Sunho ordered. "Demand their immediate surrender." The communications officer opened a channel. Sunho's message was simple and direct. "Attention, Earth. This is Fleet Admiral Sunho of the Vralthian hegemony, acting under the authority of the Galactic Council. You have violated the terms of your expulsion by maintaining military forces. You will power down all weapons, surrender your ships, and submit to Council authority. You have 1 standard hour to comply." The response came back in less than 30 seconds. A human voice, female, calm and cold. "This is General Jiwan of the Unified Earth Defense Force. Your authority means nothing here. The Council expelled us from galactic society. We are no longer bound by your laws or your commands. You have entered our system uninvited and with hostile intent. You have 1 chance to turn around and leave. If you do not, we will destroy you." Sunho actually laughed. The arrogance of these humans was astounding. "We have 200 warships. How many do you have, General?" 20, 30? "Enough," Jiwan replied. "You wanted to see what humans look like without your chains. Here we are. Last chance, Admiral. Leave or die." Sunho cut the transmission. "Battle formations. Prepare to advance on Earth. We will teach these primitives a lesson they will never forget." The Vralthian fleet began moving into the system in perfect formation. It was a beautiful sight, a demonstration of military precision and power. 200 ships moving as one, their weapons charging, their shields raised. They made it 20 million kilometers before the first attack hit. The asteroids came out of nowhere, moving at relativistic speeds. Chunks of rock the size of buildings accelerated by mass drivers hidden in the asteroid belt. They slammed into the Vralthian formation like the fist of an angry god. The first ship to die was the cruiser Pride of Vralth. An asteroid punched through her shields as if they did not exist, tore through her hull and exited the other side. The ship broke in half, atmosphere venting into space. 3,000 Vralthians died in seconds. More asteroids followed. The Vralthians tried to shoot them down, but the rocks were moving too fast and there were too many of them. 6 ships destroyed in the first minute, 10, 15 evasive maneuvers, Sunho shouted. "Break formation and scatter." But breaking formation was exactly what the humans wanted. As the Varalthian fleet scattered, human ships appeared. They had been hiding in the interference from Mars's magnetic field, invisible to sensors until they powered up their weapons. Captain Yeji watched from the bridge of the Indomitable as her tactical display filled with enemy targets. Her ship was at the center of the human formation, with the cruisers and destroyers arranged around her. "All ships," she said calmly, "execute attack pattern Alpha. Fire at will." The Indomitable's main weapon was something the Council had never seen before, a gravitational singularity cannon that created a tiny black hole and fired it at the target. The black hole existed for only a fraction of a second, but that was enough. The first shot hit a Varalthian battleship. The singularity formed at the ship's center, and for one terrible moment the entire vessel was crushed into a space the size of a basketball. Then the singularity evaporated, releasing a burst of radiation. Where the battleship had been, there was now only debris. Yeji's weapons officer was grinning like a maniac. "Target destroyed, Captain. Reloading. Next target acquired." "Fire," Yeji ordered. The battle became chaos. The Varalthians had superior numbers, but the humans had superior weapons and superior tactics. Every human ship fought like a cornered predator, aggressive and merciless. The cruiser Sol used nuclear-tipped missiles, each warhead powerful enough to vaporize a city. The destroyer Busan deployed clouds of self-replicating nanomachines that ate through enemy hulls like acid. The destroyer Daegu used electromagnetic pulse weapons that fried enemy electronics and left their ships drifting helplessly. And everywhere, human ships moved with a speed and aggression that shocked the Varalthians. Council warfare was about maneuvering and positioning, trying to gain advantage while minimizing casualties. Human warfare was about killing the enemy as quickly as possible. Sunho watched his fleet being torn apart and could not believe what he was seeing. His ships were dying. His carefully trained crews were being slaughtered, and he could do nothing to stop it. "All ships fall back to Rally Point Delta," he ordered. "We need to regroup." But the humans did not give him time to regroup. They pressed the attack relentlessly, picking off stragglers and preventing the Varalthians from forming any kind of defensive line. On Earth, Daeho led a boarding party onto a disabled Varalthian cruiser. He was no longer a security officer. He was a special forces commander, leading a team of 50 elite soldiers. They breached the hull and swept through the ship, securing it deck by deck. The Varalthian crew tried to resist, but they were not warriors. They were Navy personnel trained for ship operations, not hand-to-hand combat. Daeho and his team moved through them like sharks through minnows. Within 20 minutes, the ship was secured. Daeho stood on the bridge and activated the communication system. "General Jiwan, the cruiser Savage Pride is ours. No survivors among the command crew." Jiwan's voice came back. "Understood. Hold position and await salvage teams. We want their technology intact." Daeho acknowledged and set his team to securing the ship. Through the viewport, he could see the battle still raging, human ships darting between Varalthian vessels, firing and maneuvering with deadly precision. It was beautiful and terrible. 4 hours into the battle, Admiral Sunho finally accepted the truth. He was not going to win. His fleet, the pride of the Varalthian military, was being destroyed. He had lost over 100 ships. The humans had lost 3. He tried to retreat to take his remaining ships and flee back to Council space. But the humans had prepared for that too. Long-range missile platforms positioned at the system's edge launched their payloads. Thousands of missiles streaked toward the fleeing Varalthian ships. The missiles were not trying to destroy the ships. They were trying to disable the hyperspace drives, and they succeeded. One by one, Varalthian ships found themselves unable to jump to safety. They were trapped in the Sol system with a human fleet that showed no mercy. Sunho's flagship was one of the last ships still fighting. The Conqueror had taken damage, but her main systems were still operational. Sunho knew what he had to do. "Set course for Earth," he ordered. "Full speed. If we are going to die, we will take their homeworld with us." His crew stared at him in horror. "Sir, that would be a violation of every law of warfare. We would be targeting civilians." "They are primitives," Sunho snarled. "They do not deserve the protection of civilized law." "Execute my orders." The Conqueror turned toward Earth and accelerated. If she could get close enough, her self-destruct sequence would release enough energy to devastate the planet's surface. It would be a final act of vengeance, but Yeji was watching. The moment the Conqueror changed course, she understood Sunho's intention. "All ships priority target," she broadcast. "The Vralthian flagship is making a suicide run at Earth. Stop it. Whatever it takes." The Indomitable and 5 destroyers converged on the Conqueror. They poured fire into the larger ship, but her shields held. Sunho had diverted all power to shields and engines. He was not trying to fight anymore. He was just trying to reach Earth. Yeji made a decision. "Helm ramming speed. Put us between that ship and Earth." Her crew looked at her in shock. "Captain, a collision at these speeds will destroy both ships." "I know," Yeji said calmly. "But it will save Earth. Do it." The Indomitable accelerated, moving to intercept the Conqueror. At the last moment, Yeji activated the ship's gravitational weapon at point-blank range. The singularity formed between the two ships. Both vessels were torn apart by gravitational forces beyond comprehension. Metal sheared. Systems exploded. In 3 seconds, 2 of the most powerful warships ever built ceased to exist. But the Indomitable's sacrifice worked. The Conqueror never reached Earth. When the battle finally ended, the Sol system was filled with debris and the bodies of the dead. Of the 200 Vralthian ships that had entered the system, 7 survived. They surrendered immediately. Admiral Sunho survived the destruction of his flagship. His escape pod was recovered by a human patrol ship. He was brought to Earth in chains, broken and humiliated. General Jiwan stood in the command center and watched the final casualty reports come in. The humans had lost the Indomitable and 11 other ships. Captain Yeji was dead, along with 3,000 other brave souls. But they had won. The Vralthian fleet was destroyed, and Earth was safe. Jiwan activated the long-range transmitter. It was time to send a message to the galaxy, time to show them what humanity had become. "To the Galactic Council," she began. "You expelled us to make yourselves feel safe. You forgot what we really are. We are not your victims. We are not your servants. We are apex predators from a death world, and we held back our strength out of respect for civilized society. That respect is over. You wanted to see humans without chains. Here we are, and we are coming for you." 5 years had passed since the Council's expulsion vote. 3 years since the Battle of Terra. The galaxy was a very different place now. Hyarin stood in what used to be the Grand Assembly Hall and looked out at the gathered representatives. The chamber had not changed much physically, but everything else was different. Where once 200 species had debated as equals, now they sat in ranks that showed their new status in the galaxy. At the top sat humanity, not as members of the Council, but as its masters. The Galactic Council no longer existed. In its place was the Terran Commonwealth, and every species in the chamber knew who held the real power. Hyarin herself had changed. She was no longer Ambassador Hyarin, voice of a desperate expelled species. She was Governor General Hyarin, second in authority only to the unified Earth government itself. Her hair was completely gray now, and new lines marked her face, but her eyes were as sharp as ever. "This session will come to order," she said, her voice carrying through the chamber. "We have much to discuss today." The representatives settled into silence. Some looked at her with respect, others with fear, a few with hatred. Hyarin did not care which. Emotions were irrelevant. Results were all that mattered. The past 3 years had been brutal. After the Battle of Terra, human fleets had poured out of the Sol system like water through a broken dam. They had not come seeking revenge, though many species expected it. They had come seeking order. The galaxy that the Council had maintained was falling apart. Without human expertise, critical systems were failing. Without human peacekeeping, old conflicts were reigniting. Species were dying and civilizations were collapsing. Humanity offered a choice: submit to the Terran Commonwealth and receive aid, or resist and be conquered. Most species chose submission. The few that chose resistance learned quickly why that was a mistake. The Vralthian hegemony had tried to fight. They had assembled another fleet, smaller than the first but still formidable. General Jiwan had personally led the human response. The battle had lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the Vralthian military no longer existed, and their homeworld was under human occupation. Now the Vralthians sat in the lowest tier of the assembly, broken and humiliated. Their representative was a junior official with no real authority. The hegemony that had once threatened half the galaxy was now a subject state, its people rebuilding under human supervision. Other species had been smarter. The Mirini, who had voted against the expulsion and tried to help humanity, were rewarded with autonomy and favored status. Counselor Tal sat at Hieron's right hand, her golden fur now streaked with white. She served as chief advisor to the Commonwealth, a bridge between the old ways and the new. Hieron began the day's business. First item, the petition from the Kavros regarding their fusion reactor repairs. Status report. A human engineer stepped forward. Ma'am, the reactor is now operating at 90% capacity. Full restoration is expected within 2 months. We have also trained local technicians to handle routine maintenance. Hieron nodded. Good. The Kavros petition is granted. They will receive continued technical support in exchange for mineral rights in the outer Kavros belt. The Kavros representative bowed in gratitude. This was how the Commonwealth worked. Species received help, but they paid for it. Nothing was free. Humanity had learned that lesson the hard way. Second item, Hieron continued, the Althari request for medical assistance. The Althari representative stood. He was young, chosen after the old political class had been purged. Vexthan himself was dead, executed by his own people for his role in the catastrophe that had befallen them. Governor General, the Althari said carefully, our population has still not recovered from the plague. We request access to human medical technology and training for our doctors. Hieron studied him for a moment. The Althari had supported the expulsion vote enthusiastically. They had celebrated humanity's departure, and then they had paid the price when the plague came and they had no cure. Approved, Hieron said. We will send medical teams and supplies. In exchange, the Althari will provide labor for the Mars shipyard expansion project. 5,000 workers for 2 years. The Althari representative hesitated, then bowed. Agreed. Thank you, Governor General. This was the new reality. Humanity helped, but humanity was not gentle about it. The price was always paid. After the session ended, Hieron walked through the station corridors with Tull. The Mirani counselor had become a true friend over the years, one of the few people Hieron could speak honestly with. Do you ever regret it? Tull asked quietly. The way things turned out? Hieron was silent for a moment. Every day, she finally said. We lost so many people. Captain Yeji, the crew of the Indomitable, the colonists we could not save, the humans who died at Horizon Station. I remember all of them. She paused at a viewport looking out at the stars. But I do not regret what we did after. The Council made a choice. They decided we were too dangerous to exist in their society. And they were right. We are dangerous. We always were. They just did not realize that our restraint was a gift, not a weakness. Tal's ears drooped. My people tried to warn them. We told them that humanity was essential, that expelling you would be a disaster, but fear and prejudice won out. I know, Hieron said softly, and that is why the Marini are our partners now, not our subjects. You were loyal when loyalty cost you something. We remember that. On the other side of the galaxy, on the world of New Pyongyang, a very different scene was unfolding. The colony that had been abandoned 3 years ago was alive again with human voices. Administrator Minho stood in the central plaza, now aged and weathered but still standing straight. He watched as transport ships landed one after another, bringing colonists home. The 10,000 volunteers who had stayed behind had kept the settlement running perfectly. Every system worked. Every field was planted. The lights had stayed on. A young officer approached him, saluting sharply. Sir, the transports are offloading now. We will have the colony back to full population within 3 days. Minho smiled. Good. Tell the newcomers that the old crew will show them around. We know every corner of this place now. That evening there was a celebration in the plaza. Music played, food was shared, and stories were told. Minho gave a short speech, his voice rough with emotion. 3 years ago we made a choice, he said. We chose to stay when others had to leave. We kept this world alive because we believed humanity would return. And we were right. Welcome home, everyone. Welcome home. The crowd cheered, and Minho allowed himself a moment of pure joy. They had survived. Against all odds, they had survived. On Earth, in the deep command center, General G1 was preparing to retire. She had led the military through its darkest hours and its greatest victory. Now at age 60, she was ready to step down. Her successor was already chosen, a brilliant young strategist named Junho. He stood at attention as G1 prepared to hand over command. "The Commonwealth is secure," G1 told him. "Our fleets control the major trade routes. Our technology is a generation ahead of anyone else. Our economy is strong, but do not become complacent. The moment we stop being vigilant is the moment someone will try to take it all away." Junho nodded seriously. "I understand, ma'am. What advice would you give me?" Ji-won thought for a moment. "Remember why we fought? Not for conquest, not for revenge. We fought because we refused to be victims. Keep that in mind, and you will make the right decisions." She handed him the command codes and saluted one final time. "The fleet is yours, Admiral. Make us proud." On Tartarus 7, Bowman was finally going home. The mining station was being shut down, its resources exhausted. He had survived 3 years in hiding, sending intelligence reports and watching the galaxy change. Now human ships had arrived to evacuate the remaining workers. As he boarded the transport, a young human officer recognized him. "Are you Bowman? The intelligence operative?" Bowman nodded tiredly. "That was me." "Is the war over?" The officer smiled. "The war is over. We won. You are a hero, sir. Your report saved lives." Bowman did not feel like a hero. He felt tired and old and ready to see Earth again. But he accepted the praise gracefully and found a seat on the transport. Through the viewport, he watched Tartarus 7 shrink into the distance. He had hated that place, but it had also been where he proved to himself what he was capable of. He had been alone and afraid, but he had never given up. That was what it meant to be human. In the rebuilt assembly hall, Hyaron gave her final speech of the day. It was a ceremony marking the 3rd anniversary of the Battle of Terra, a day of remembrance for those who had died. 3 years ago, she began, the Vralthian fleet came to our system expecting an easy victory. They thought we were weak because we had been peaceful. They thought we were broken because we had been expelled. They learned the truth at great cost. She paused, looking around the chamber at representatives from dozens of species. The Galactic Council made a choice based on fear. They saw our strength and decided we were too dangerous to include in their society. They were not entirely wrong. We are dangerous. But what they failed to understand is that we chose to be peaceful. We chose to be cooperative. We chose to be diplomatic. Her voice grew harder. When you took away that choice, you left us with only one option: survival at any cost. And humanity has always been very, very good at surviving. She gestured to the viewport where human warships patrolled in perfect formation. This is the galaxy you created. Not the one we wanted, but the one we were forced to build. You outlawed humanity and thought that would make you safe. Instead, you guaranteed humanity's dominance for generations to come. Hyaron's expression softened slightly. But we are not conquerors at heart. We are builders. And now we will build something new. A galaxy where strength is respected, where competence is rewarded, where species are judged by what they contribute rather than by their species. It will not be perfect. It will not be gentle. But it will be fair. And it will endure. She looked directly at where the Vralthian representative sat. You tried to destroy us. You failed. Now you will help us build the future, whether you like it or not. That is the price of your mistake. The chamber was silent. Then slowly species began to applaud. Some because they believed in Hyaron's vision. Some because they feared what would happen if they did not. But they all applauded. That night Hyaron stood alone in her quarters and looked at an old photograph. It showed her younger self, standing with other diplomats at the first human delegation to the Galactic Council. They had been so hopeful then, so eager to be part of something bigger than themselves. She touched the glass gently. Most of those people were dead now, killed in the expulsion or in the battles that followed or simply by time and stress. She was one of the few survivors of that idealistic age. We did not want this, she said quietly to the photograph. We wanted to be partners, not rulers. But they gave us no choice. I hope you understand that. I hope history remembers that we tried. She put the photograph away and turned to face the viewport. Outside, human ships moved between the stars, carrying colonists and cargo and hope to 1,000 worlds. The galaxy was at peace, but it was a peace enforced by human strength. Vexthon's final words, recorded before his execution, had become a saying throughout Commonwealth space. People quoted it as a warning, a reminder of what happened when fear overcame wisdom. We thought we were caging a beast. We only took away the leash. Hyaron smiled grimly. It was an appropriate epitaph for the old Galactic Council. They had been afraid of what humanity might become if left unchecked. Their fear had created the very monster they imagined. But that monster was not mindless. It was not cruel for cruelty's sake. It was simply human with all that implied, capable of great kindness and terrible violence, of building civilizations and burning them down, of mercy and vengeance in equal measure. The Council had outlawed humanity and doomed itself in the process. Now humanity would shape the galaxy's future, whether the galaxy liked it or not, and perhaps in another few generations the fear would fade. Perhaps the galaxy would learn to see humanity not as conquerors but as the partners they had always wanted to be. Perhaps. But not today. Today humanity stood supreme, respected and feared in equal measure, and Hyaron would make sure that position was maintained, no matter what it cost. The age of the Galactic Council was over. The age of humanity had begun,